Thank you everyone for joining us for the DCSBDC COVID-19 Initiative webinar series. We do these webinars to help small business owners get through the pandemic and COVID-19 with advice on marketing and legal advice and business development and all kinds of other things to help you through the pandemic. So thank you so much for joining us. Make sure that your mic is on mute and your video has been turned off as well. So today we are talking about why public relations is important to your small business. My name is Danielle Ricks. I'll be your facilitator for today. And I am the owner of a small business myself, Danielle Ricks Productions. I am also the media communications and marketing subject matter expert for the DCSBDC COVID-19 Initiative, small counselor for the business. So our agenda for today, I'm going to introduce you to our guest. And she is going to walk you through PR Explained. What is it? Why do you need it? How can it help your small business? And then she's going to talk about the business of public relations, the type of PR, the benefits of PR. She's going to walk you through strategies. You guys are going to walk away with tried and true strategies. And then she's going to talk about how to develop your business, your PR plan. And then finally, we're going to leave time for questions and answers. So without further ado, let me go ahead and introduce you to my friend, PR guru, Xina Eiland, president of X+PR. Is it X+PR?
It's X+PR and it stands for Xina PR. And also the X, I had to be a little creative.
The creative, because you're creative.
The unknown, right?
Unknown.
It's the unknown.
I like it. I like it. She's also the co-host of Get Found, Get Funded and co-founder of Unmute. And she's going to explain what all that is to us. But Xina, I'm just so excited and glad you decided to join us and you were available to join us to talk to people about PR. There is this misconception about what it is. People think I do PR because I'm in media communications. I'm like, yeah, no, that's not what I do. But I can find you somebody if that's what you need. I can find you somebody to do it, but that's not what I do. I do media and communications, brand strategy, marketing, and video production. So go ahead and tell us.
I don't do. Those are the things I do not do. So that's
right. But together we have great partnerships. So tell the folks a little bit about yourself and about your business and what you do.
So first of all, I want to say, Danielle, thank you. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to help small businesses and entrepreneurs who are looking to promote their business or their thought leadership or their services, whatever it is. I'm happy to be here for DCSBDC. It is an honor, so thank you. Little bit about myself. Basically, what is it about me? So I'm the owner and founder of X+PR. I've been in business for more than, almost 15 years. I started in 2005. My background's in healthcare communications, and I ended up branching off, helping small business owners, and also in the Black tech and startup space as well, because I do a lot of work in health communication, especially in disparities of care and its disparities in health, and which you all heard those terms during COVID. Those terms that you heard about underlying conditions, that is nothing new. That has been going on with underrepresented and Black and brown communities for a number of years. And I was in that area of PR, helping to promote that and helping those communities understand those underlying conditions. Also, there's a whole thing around all of that I can't even get into right now, but I use those skills and I transferred it over to helping small businesses, helping disenfranchised businesses, and helping entrepreneurs so that they can understand, the things that they need to do to help promote their business. Next slide. So we're going to define PR, and I'm going to explain what that is. Next slide.
Yes.
So the definition of PR is the business of inducing the public to have an understanding for and goodwill towards a person, firm, or institution. So what does all that mean, right? So person, it could be a celebrity. It could be a person who's promoting their thought leadership. it could be just that person's brand. You promote that person's brand, and you use a variety of different tools to help promote that brand. It could be your firm, it could be an organization, it can be a service or institution. PR can be used in a lot of different ways. And as Scandal's no longer on, but I used to use Olivia Pope as an example. She used PR. She used PR to help get the word out about not only just what her services, but was more so about her clients and what they were doing. And so that was very interesting. And I was glued to Scandal for that reason, because it was a good way, a mechanism or understanding for you to see how she manipulated the press. And we're not trying to manipulate the press. We try to be honest and use truth and facts to the press so that they can help promote your brand. Next slide, please. So advertising. So everybody's always asking me, what is the difference between advertising and PR? So you pay for advertising. Not that you don't pay for PR, but you definitely pay for advertising. You're paying for ads, you're paying for outreach, you're paying to, you're hosting conferences and you have sponsors. All of that is all a part of advertising. However, publicity is what we pray for. And the reason why I say that is, we pitch and we're trying to help push out there all of our, pitch different media outlets, and we're trying to pitch our clients, and we're literally praying that they take this story, because they may not take it. And so you have to kind of think about all of the different ways that you're going to help the media decide they're going to take that particular story. And think of PR professionals as storytellers. You are a storyteller, and we're not trying to reach paying customers. We're trying to reach everybody. Okay. You do have a demographic, you do have a target audience, but the goal is you're trying to reach everybody. So in the past, I know that some entrepreneurs, some small businesses have resisted the opportunity to tell their own stories, because they're like, oh, I don't want to seem like I'm bragging. I don't want to seem like, I'm a know-it-all, or my company is this X, Y, and Z. And I always argue with them. You always have a story. You have some type of a story to tell somebody. And with the increase in business activity and intensity in industry competition, combined with the shrinking classrooms, and newsrooms, let me make that very clear. They were shrinking before COVID. They're really shrinking now. And I'll give some examples of how they're shrinking now, because I'm impacted, and it's even forcing me to be able to tell my client's story better. The challenge will be to use data to create a compelling story, leverage digital channels the right way, and actively connect with all stakeholders. Next slide. Types of PR. So here are to me, the big buckets of the types of PR. Paid media, which is a form of really advertising, but they sometimes lump it into the PR category, which are your commercials, which is radio, paid search. And let me give you an example. So I worked with Maryland Health Connection through Sandra Hannon. She has the Hannon Group, and she hired me to handle the media portion for, media and also the outreach portion for the state of Maryland to help people sign up basically for Obamacare under the Affordable Care Act. And so what we did a number of things to help get the word out for people to sign up for Obamacare. And so we use paid media. So that could be commercials, that could be radio. So commercials on television, radio, ads. We work with different radio stations and doing paid online searches, trying to get the word out through online using Google Analytics, and help get the word out so we can get to people, telling them, like, you know what, if you don't have health insurance, please sign up for the Maryland Health Exchange. Own media. Sometimes there are people, you can use websites. I look at that as a form of PR. So it's important to have your website. I look at that. And so, because that's the first thing the newsroom will do, or a news person or a journalist, when you say, hey, and you send them an email, I want you to cover X, Y, and Z, the first thing they're going to do is go to your website, and they're going to do online searches. Blogs. Do not ignore bloggers. Do not ignore influencers. They can help you as well. Sometimes they're paid, and they are supposed to disclose when they're paid. And other times they're not paid. They just like what you're doing, or they like your mission or your services, and they may just write a blog. Sometimes you can write that blog. You can put it on your own website. Hence, that's why you need a website. Or there are industry blogs, such as under, for example, Forbes, Business Insiders. They actually have writers who are influencers who may not be on the payroll, but sometimes they're paid, sometimes they're unpaid, and they can write a story and get it placed in one of those publications. Facebook groups. Don't underestimate Facebook groups, whether they private, public. Use those opportunities to promote your business. To me, that's a free way of doing it. You can do or you can go to Facebook paid advertising. Once again, free. Once again, that's PR, but you're paying for it. So that falls into the paid media bucket. And campaign sites. There are people who launch campaigns. I always recommend, if you have a service that you're launching, a new business, something that people be interested in, I always recommend to put together a campaign around it where you're using a combination of earned media and also unearned media. And then let's go into your tweets and shares, customer reviews. I know people who might get in a Facebook group and say, hey, if those of you who have read my book, can you go on Amazon.com where I'm selling it? And can you please make sure that you go through all that? So just make sure that you don't put the customer reviews. Don't forget about that. And Danielle, I forgot to tell you, go to the next slide so you can see all of this. So this is what I was just going through, and I apologize. I forgot to tell her to move to the next slide. And news mentions. You don't have to always have a story. Sometimes you might get a phone call and say, hey, can you comment on this? I get that a lot. I have one freelance writer, and she'll call me and say, hey, Xina, I'm working on this story about Black men and who they're going to vote for in 2020. I'm just trying to make it relevant. Doesn't matter who the candidate is. Do you have any clients who are African American men who would like to comment on it? Or I might get a call and say, Xina, COVID-19 is really hitting a lot of families. Is there a family that you can talk to that we can interview, and we can also make sure if it's coming through one of your clients, we can make sure they get credit for it. So news mentions are important. So since I forgot to say forward the slide, so paid media, commercials, radio, and paid search, owned media, and then you have earned media. And then at the bottom of all of this, that to me, that goes right across the board is what? Social media. You want to share content, you want to create a buzz on social media. And once again, I mentioned this earlier, the minute you pitch something to a reporter and they don't know anything about you, the first thing they do is go online and do a search and see if you have a Facebook page, see if you have a LinkedIn or Instagram, your website. What are people saying about you online? All of that is very important. Next slide. Why do small businesses really need PR? Why do you need this? So you want to create, next slide, hon. You want to create intentional brand awareness. What do I mean by intentional brand awareness? We want to understand what your brand value is. What is your brand? And that is very important. And I do get clients who come to me and they want PR, and they really have not really defined their own brand. You know, we're trying to, you know, I'm talking to them and I want press here and there, but what is your brand? What is your brand value? What's your brand identity? I think that is important to have that really done up front. And in brand identity doesn't just mean colors and, you know, your text or your font and your logo. It also means, what is your brand imprint? What are you known for? Generate product awareness, business leads. I'm going to give you an example. I have a client, Black Mama Vodka. Her name is Vanessa Braxton. And Vanessa was a great client because I could pitch her in a lot of different ways. So she originally came to me because she was raising funds, which all of you should be interested in, raising funds through the Obama Jobs Act. And it was an equity crowdfunding campaign. And she wanted to get the word out for the next round so that people would buy more, would participate and buy actual, I don't want to call them shares, but it's similar to shares of her company. However, because of the pandemic happened, we couldn't go that route. And we pivoted because she makes vodka and she was contacted by the FDA. We need vodka distillers, alcohol distillers to make hand sanitizers because there's a shortage right now during COVID. So I went into this for one reason and ended up promoting something else totally different from the whole reason why I ended up becoming her publicist. So we were promoting the fact that she had hand sanitizers, which is product awareness, which generated more business leads for her because a lot of people did not know there was a Black woman making vodka. And so that led to increased sales on the alcohol side, buying her vodka product. Then that led to, she makes tea. That increased additional sales. So it can generate business leads. You want to attract investors, partners, and acquirers. You want to be able to track those people. They look for stories about you. I've been working with, actually, I just got off the phone this morning with one of my clients who is an investor. She is a VC. I was hired to help them attract additional investors so they can close a fund. And the goal originally was 3 million, and they ended up raising 6 million after they hired me. Now, I'm not gonna say that was the whole reason why they were able to meet their goal and then some, but the different, opportunities where I had her on different outlets. They were mentioned in Forbes. She was interviewed on some very Black Enterprise. She was interviewed in some other different Business Insider. She was also on Yahoo Finance as well, because they were raising funding and they needed additional investors to close this fund. So that's another reason why you want to use PR. You want to recruit talent and retain existing staff. People read about you. They see you online and they're saying, oh, I want to work for that person. Oh, I want to learn more from this business. Oh, I want to be a part of that business. As I mentioned to you earlier, build credibility, brand trust, and there are also people who are seeking to get a seat on the board. And I've had clients who have come to me and say, I just want press out there because at some point down the road, I want to get a board seat. And I want to be known for this particular thought leadership. Next slide. So before I get into your opportunity, let me explain to you why you need PR. And also it kind of ties in too, as well, why you need somebody like myself to help you with helping you get the word out or create the buzz about your business. PR professionals now outnumber journalists 5-1. Now this statistic was pre-COVID. I have a feeling that has now gone up. 44% of journalists get pitched 20 times a day or more. And I think it's even more so now. So I want you to think about all these stats. 64% of journalists and writers think it is of some importance that you build a personal connection before pitching them. And that's one thing that I have learned over the years, having those personal relationships and people knowing who I am and my name. It helps. It's easier when I send over a pitch, they know who I am and they open that email right away. But those who they don't know that well, unless you have a really, really interesting, catchy headline, that's what helps you. Also, 61% of readers view press releases in the first 4 days of the week. They don't, like I said, they don't always open it unless it's a really interesting headline. And 70% of the buying process is complete before a prospect contacts a vendor. So what I mean by that, I'm using buying process as an example of closing that journalist to do a story, right? So you want to be able to touch that journalist, that media outlet a certain number of times. And sometimes you have to touch it more than 7 or 8 times. You want to be able to, for that journalist to get to know you and then learn about your product. And so by the time you send that next email, hey, they know who you are, they know about your business, you've been around, they already will say, you know what, this does sound like an interesting story. How can I work you in? Or they'll keep you in the back of your mind. So just keep all of that. So your opportunities, let's get back to the slide. I just wanted to add those different statistics so you understand how competitive it is out there. Control your narrative. You want to be able to control your own story. So I always tell it's important. And one of the things I do like about certain people, whether I don't like them or not, they may get out there and tell their own story and they're able to control their narrative. So you want to be out there telling your story first. You don't want somebody else telling your story or owning your story. You own your story. And then that can evolve and adjust and be modified along the way as necessary. You want to be able to educate your audience. Is there something that you need to educate your audience? Is there a problem that you're trying to solve? That's when you need PR to help build credibility, bring in business, and buy a product. You want to get press attention by sharing amazing stories. I cannot go on and on about stories. I'm going to go back to Vanessa. Vanessa started off with an equity crowdfunding for her Black Mama Tea and Cafe. It turned into purchasing her hand sanitizers because her story was she was a Black manufacturer and distiller in the United States. And that was a story. And then in turn, they were talking about the hand sanitizers she created, along with the other products that she has been in business for a number of years. You want to write catchy and eye-catching headlines. When you send out an email, and when I send out an email, sometimes I will try different headlines to get the journalist's attention. Remember I told you that number, how journalists are pitched? They're getting pitched every day through email, through phone calls, 24/7. And you want something to stand out there. So I always think of a good catchy headline. Identify brand ambassadors or influencers from existing customer base, your relationships. I mentioned earlier, do not ignore bloggers and do not ignore influencers who write about your particular, who write in your industry or who are thought leaders. They can help you get a long way with their followers and their followers learning about you. The world is a newsroom. Everyone's a journalist. And influencers are the new publicists. So that's why I say always, always remember the influencers who are involved. And then there's no outlet too small to talk about your brand. Don't say, I really don't want that particular outlet to talk about my brand because that's not big enough. I really, really would like to have the Washington Post. sometimes the Washington Post will see, if they go online and see there's no other story out there about you, they may not want to take that chance to write about you yet if they don't see anything else online or a story written on you, or you haven't been on the news. They may not want to take that risk. Sometimes they do, depending on the subject. But most of the time, they's like, okay, well, we'll keep an eye. We'll keep it in the back of our minds. You know, it took me. I had a client who got on the Today Show. I had been pitching and pitching and pitching. So finally, I got a phone call, and they said, "I want to know why I have 5 different producers coming up to me asking me about this person." That's because I've been pitching so much to the Today Show. And then also, they went online, they saw how much press, they finally came to me and said, we want to put this person on. So don't ever neglect the small influencers, the smaller outlets, the blog, podcasts, they all add up. Next slide.
Great, and I just want to do a time check. We're at almost 12:30. We do want to leave time for questions. And
how much time do we have? 15 minutes?
About 20 minutes, about 20.
Okay.
We'll leave 10 minutes for questions. And if you do have questions, you guys go ahead and drop them in the chat, and we'll move on to strategies to developing a plan. This is the meat of the presentation. So we want to make sure we don't rush through this part.
Okay. All right. Let's go to the next slide so we can go through this. So how to develop your plan. Amplify your story. What stories do you want to tell? What are some of the stories that you think that somebody will be interested in? And what do you think the press will be interested in? Maybe you should go to learning about some of the journalists who might write about you or write about your product or your service or your business. So get to know that journalist. Follow them on Twitter. Go on LinkedIn, try to friend them. There's so many things you can do to get to learn who those journalists are. And journalists appreciate that you take the time to get to know and learn their stories, what they're writing about, versus getting a pitch. They don't write about that subject. They don't know anything about it. So make sure you do your research. Know your outlets. Sometimes broadcast is not the best place for you. You know, you would like to be on television talking about it, but it might not be the best place. It really might be some of the online platforms, some of the online newspapers. It could be blogs. It could be business platforms. Don't always just keep your I have to be on television, because I hear that so much. At the end of the day, a lot of people want to be on television, and it really takes up it may not be your medium. Know your audience and maintain a PR calendar. And I cannot say that enough. So what I do, I have a PR calendar for social media for that client, also for their media hits. So I try to maintain what I'm going to pitch that month or what I'm going to pitch that week, depending on how much news they have coming out there. So look at the calendar, think about what you want to pitch, think about your headlines of how you're going to get it out there, and who are your journalists you're going to pitch to. Next slide. I'm always reaching to change the slides. I'll keep doing that.
I got
you. Amplify your voice. How do you do this? Develop a personal story and use unique data to amplify your impact. So there's some personal stories you can wrap around that particular idea you want to, that concept that you want to pitch. Is some data around it that you should wrap around it? Could you put some data out there? For example, and I'm not to make it sound so grim, but this is a good one. The suicide rate went up last year. This is pre-COVID among teenagers. And I was working with a mental health association. That was an opportunity for me to pitch to the journalists who are writing about this story about the mental health association. And because they were experts in that area, they knew, they can understand, they can break down the reasons why that those teenagers, are having some issues, and they commit suicide. Like I said, that's a grim example, but it's a real life one. And that's how I was able to get that particular client in the spotlight. Pitch a story, not an idea. Make sure it's a story. It makes it more compelling and more interesting. I mentioned earlier, solve a problem. What problem are you trying to solve? Right now, we're in the middle of a pandemic. There are so many businesses that do well and they are born out of crises. What problems can you solve right now? And if you can solve some problems, what, do you think some reporters might be interested in that story? And those are the types of things that I go through. That's the thought process that I go through in order to, get the media's attention. Be media relevant. Why now? Why you? And always include links and samples of your work. Don't overload it. You just need one or two so that you can go through and check out your samples of your work. Next slide, please. Know your journalist. I mentioned that earlier. Identify a journalist who would love to cover you. Build a target media list. Sort out this journalist by city and/or topic. Understand their beats and previous stories that they're covered. I mentioned all this earlier. This is very important. Journalists do not...
Tell them what a beat is. You and I know because we're in media, but some people on the call on the meeting may not know what a beat is.
So a beat is that particular subject that reporter writes about. So it could be, they could write about crime, they could write about health, they could write about small business, entrepreneurship, investing, stock market. Those are called beats. They're different topics, industries, politics. There are certain reporters, that's why sometimes you see on MSNBC, Fox, those are political reporters. Sometimes they may call in a different type of reporter on the story. Those are beats. Build relationships through social media. I mentioned, let me tell you, Twitter and LinkedIn are the best way. That's what I do. I build a lot of relationships online. They get to know me, they get to know my work, they see the clients, and sometimes I will get a call and say, hey, I've been following you. I saw that you've been posting about this particular client. How can I get a story? I'd like to talk to them. I also retweet their tweets. I engage on blog posts. And sometimes I write an email. I'll just say, hey, great piece. Oh my gosh. And I'll post it. I'll repost it. I'll reshare it. And they appreciate those things. And don't forget about, one thing I have to mention, don't forget about your freelance journalists. Those are golden. Just because somebody doesn't work for a particular outlet, do not ignore freelance journalists. Those are the people who might be writing for 4 or 5. I have one young lady. I go to her and I know she writes for 5 different publications, and hopefully maybe one of them will pick up my story. Next slide. And then know your outlets. Broadcast, which is television, radio, podcast. Understand where your story fits in. And I always think about where everybody's story, like I said, everybody's not for broadcast. Some people are only for a podcast or online. Sometimes there's a feature story in there and I'm going to by feature stories, sometimes that's why you see the Washington Post magazine, New York Post magazine, New York Times magazine. Those are called feature stories, and they'll do a nice written, almost like a mini biography or a mini profile on you. I love feature stories. And then I mentioned social media. Next slide. And then create a PR plan. Have your calendar. Identify your reporters. Think about, well, now in COVID, we don't have these anymore, right for now. Conferences and trade shows. However, some of these trade shows and conferences are online.
Yes, they've gone virtual.
They've gone virtual. So there are opportunities out there. You just have to find them. Identify campaigns, special awareness day. Last month was breast cancer awareness month. Was there something you can use that to promote? I always use health examples because I have my background's in health. Identify articles and white papers you might contribute. And look for opportunities in Newsjack. And this is the one last thing I'm gonna mention because I know we're running out of time. What I mean by Newsjack is story. So over the last 4 years, which has been very important, over the last 4 years, Donald Trump has been front and center headlines. It's been hard to get stories out for publicists. It's been hard. I'm not gonna lie to you. It's been very difficult. But what I do, I find a story that might work for my client. I'm like, wait a minute, there's a nugget here. And I'll use that and get the attention of the reporter based on what's trending. So that's what I mean by news jacket story. So that's how I've been able to penetrate and get through to the media in order to build, get my client covered. And and that's what I have in parentheses: election results, corporate merger, corporate crisis, news policies, sporting events. I will take something of my client who has nothing to do with this particular story, but I will figure out a way to make a connection. And those are the type of people you want. You want a publicist who has great relationships, who knows how to penetrate through all this noise in the media and get you a media hit, who knows how to write catchy headlines. All of that, all of it together works together, and it works well. Next slide, please. So my recap: do your research, be relevant, make it newsworthy, know your audience, tweet, follow, engage media on social media, create a PR calendar, and prepare and organize your opportunity to share your news. Next slide.
Yeah, so this is contact information for you, Xina. That was a lot of information. So for those of you guys that are on this call, in the Zoom, go ahead and leave your questions in the chat. DCSBDC offers free marketing assistance to all of our small business owners that are small business owners in DC or do business in DC. We do offer free services, but sometimes you've got to go outside of what we can offer, because we can't do all of the things for you that someone like Xina can do. So I wanted to make sure that if it is outside of our preview and it's bigger and larger and you actually need a full-blown campaign and you need someone to babysit that campaign for you, Xina is your contact person. This is all of her information where you can get in touch with her. And Xina, just again, talk a little bit about what that process looks like when somebody comes to work with you. And I know there's some other projects that you wanted to talk about as well before we move on to the Q&A.
Okay, just real quickly, if you come to me, feel free to email me, or that's the best way, or go to LinkedIn, whatever's easiest for you. If you're looking to get some PR help or some PR consultation, that's the best way to reach me. The other opportunity I'm working on, I don't know if any of you know Amanda Miller Littlejohn. She's a branding expert, and she and I have collaborated, and we're going to be hosting PR courses, basically, and then also you'll have her branding expertise for the next 6 months for a monthly fee. And we will definitely work with you. And not only do we teach you how to do it, we also do it for you so that you can see the results. So if you're interested in that, please put in the subject headline, maximum exposure. That's the project I'm working on with Amanda Littlejohn, if you're interested.
I like it. All right, we're gonna go to some questions. So Charmaine wants to know, she said she's a certified public accountant, and she has a certified public accounting firm, and she's interested in promoting financial advisory and literacy through her website and targeting client communications. Are there influencers or writers that she should be engaging with to support her content? And then how does she locate such resources?
So of course, you can go online, you can do your search, see if and also look at articles. Google, put in financial sources. I have a couple of financial clients. I'm working with day traders, to be honest with you, and they're also but they educate you on stock market. And then I'm also working with Deborah Owens from Wealthy You, where she's actually teaching you about budgeting, investing, and saving your money. So I have 2 of them. So what I do, I just go online, I look up different articles, I try to find the journalists, and you just have to just do your research. There's also a program called Cision that you can use to look up journalists, but that's typically, it's a fee for that. And that's what I do, to be honest with you. I do a ton of research, and because I do so much research, it's just easier for me to know the keywords to figure out who will be the right reporters to pitch to.
Someone wants to know, can you give an example of what has and what has not worked with headlines? You gave us some examples of what has worked. What fell flat for you, Xina? What just did not work?
Long, lengthy headlines. Sometimes the headlines with, and I'm trying not to say the client's name, let me say globally known industries. They don't, not that they don't want to write about them, because they write about them all the time. It's just that they want to know what's interesting. I want to hear just because you put that, and I'm just throwing their name out there. It's not that I work with them. Just because you put and because let me say, I'm gonna put one out there I haven't worked with, which is Facebook. I never worked with them. Just because you put Facebook in the headline, unless there's some really story, like I said, newsjacking, there's a story out there related to Facebook, they may not want to hear that. It's really an eye-catching headline, and it's short and it's concise, and it really draws you to it. So don't make it long. Don't think by putting let me first say, for example, your name out there. Like I have a client, like, I want my name in the headline. Nobody knows who you are. Who knows you? I'm just being frank. So it can work against you too by just like, they're like, who is,
Right. If Oprah's in the headline, that's one thing. Or
if you have Oprah,
that's one thing. But
if I put Danielle Ricks,
they're like,
they're like, who's that? They don't care. You gotta put something in there that they care about.
Right. And then someone wants to know what determines the best fit for a particular outlet. And I'm going to use an example of someone who's in the meeting right now. So we have one of our DCSBDC success stories. Kiana Stewart's in here now, and she owns 2 tech companies. So let's use her as an example. What would determine the best fit for somebody that has a tech company in the time of COVID, when you are, trying to get headlines and grab them away from the President of the United States and the President-elect of the United States?
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. We have that too now.
Right. and now you have this tech company and you're trying to find out what's the right outlet for me. And it's easy for you, Xina, because you know how to do the search. But like, what's the first thing she would put in Google? What would she do?
Depending on what type of tech, and I don't know what type of tech it is. Let's say she is
software. She does a lot of the back end, and I'm pushing her to the front end to say, hey, listen, you're the owner of the company. I know it's uncomfortable. And she's doing a great job, by the way. She's out there on LinkedIn. She's on there on Tweet. She actually hired a social media
She's solving a need. What need is she solving with that software?
Good point.
Then you put that need in there, and then that'll help you figure out which medium to pitch to, or which reporter or outlet. That it's not that it's tech, it's not that it's software, it's more so what problem you're solving. And then you can figure out who to pitch to. And
say it's you have a media production company. I did not put that out there for me. It's actually because for one of my bison who's in the meeting and I see him, but we both have media production companies. So let's say, wink, wink, you have a media production company. Is it again, what problem can you solve? Is that sort of the questions we start asking ourselves?
So what have you been doing differently since COVID?
Helping you guys manage through COVID, right?
Right. So you could pitch and tell them, "Hey, I've been working with," and I would see. This is when I spin a little bit, but it's okay.
Yeah.
I would add up all the people and say I've been helping hundreds of small businesses get through COVID. Helping them solve their problems, something like that. My media company is helping hundreds of small businesses get through COVID. So you got COVID, you have solved a problem, And another keyword is pivot.
Yeah.
That's been a hot keyword these days.
Right.
Pivoting, pivoting, pivoting. You can put that in there too. So those are things, how I've been helping companies pivot during this crisis, how my media company. And then you get into, when you get into the, and then when you get into your pitch, don't write a dissertation. Just write 4 to 5 tight sentences, very concise, that'll make a media outlet say, that's all I needed. I understand what they're doing, and I'll either contact and reach back out to them or not.
So what I'm hearing is the storytelling, and I tell people about that. I tell people about that all the time. It's all about the story. I have named myself the head storyteller of my company, right? Because it's all about the story. Is that what I'm hearing you talk about? You mentioned it a little bit in your presentation, but as we talk to the clients about how to put themselves out there, it really is about how to tell your story and what would make that story compelling for a reporter to want to retell your story.
And you just reminded me, Danielle, about something. So pre-COVID, you'll get the call. They'll say, can you come into the studio, or we'll come out to you and do the story. That's not happening these days. They're asking you to pull together the story for them. So that's why you have to have your story together and know what your story is, because you may need to send video, you may need to send some blog posts. You're going to be the one actually creating the story for them, because they can't come to you. You're going to be doing the interview on Zoom. And I've heard that, for example, in BC4, I'm assuming some people are here from Washington, D.C., a lot of them have cleared that building. They're working from home. But you can see that on television. They're working from home. I have been working with reporters who have literally been shooting video for their own story.
Right.
And because they can't get access to a cameraman. It's been very, very rare. I have had an opportunity to go out, and it was outdoors. We all had to wear masks, where a cameraman showed up. It was that reporter pulling together a story, a segment in video, and tell that story, and send that story in. So,
and then they have to tweet out the story. Then they're going to put the story on LinkedIn. So producers, when I was coming up, back in the day when I was a producer, when I was coming up, you had a cameraman, you had the audio guy, you had a grip, you had somebody who was going to edit for you. It went on TV and you were done. And that's not where it ends now. Now you have to be able to shoot and edit and write and promote your own pieces. And keeping that in mind when you're telling your story is going to, this is why Xina is telling you to go find these journalists in your particular lane and your particular beat that you can form a relationship with. I always tell people that you kind of want to reach out to these folks. If you're not going to hire a professional like Xina to do it, you want to reach out to them before you need them. So you want to build those relationships before the ask, so that when the ask comes, it doesn't feel like it's coming from left field. It feels like it's coming from a tried and true trusted friend who they've gotten to know and they respect, and they feel comfortable retelling your own story.
And the last thing a reporter needs, especially today, is pulling their hair out, trying to pull together your story.
Right.
Really have to come with a ready-made story, have the things that they need, photos, videos, other blog posts, whatever. Some of your customers, customer views, some of your customers. I got called in last week for Deborah Owens with Wealthy You. They didn't want to just interview Deborah. They wanted to interview the people who went through her program. Well, I was one of those people who went through the program.
Right.
So I was interviewed. So do you have any customers or clients who they can interview? Right. So that's another way of helping to get your story out there. So be prepared and be ready. So it's a lot more work today. I'm gonna be honest with you, and I'm even pivoting, making some adjustments.
Someone said they find it overwhelming trying to manage 2 social media sites for their business. And how do you propose they advertise without any real revenue currently generating because of the pandemic? Before you answer, Xina, let me just tell you that when we talk about those free services, I am also a counselor of DCSBDC. So anything social media related, go ahead and book some time with me and we could talk it through. And also a little plug, which I'll come to again later.
No, Danielle, I was going to tell you to talk about this because this is
right.
So just go ahead and answer the question.
I will do that. December 7th, we're going to have a webinar to continue the conversation about social media. So my biggest advice is to find a platform like a Hootsuite or a TweetDeck, or they're bigger, broader, more enterprise level social media content management systems, but to go ahead and get a content management system so that you can post to both businesses from one space. One thing I do want to make sure you understand is that your messaging has to be different across platforms. So you don't want the same thing to show up on Instagram that's showing up on Twitter, and you don't want the same thing that's showing up on Facebook to show up on LinkedIn. You really need to understand your audience. So I'm here to help you through that. It's more than I can get through, and we've got about 3 minutes left. But the biggest advice I can tell you is to get a social media content management platform that will help you organize. Go ahead and, just like Xina said, you're going to do a PR calendar. You also have to do a social media calendar so that you know what you're talking about Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I like alliteration. So sometimes Monday is Motivation Monday, Tuesday's Tip Tuesday, Thursdays, obviously Throwback Thursday. So there are different ways that you can do it so that you don't have to kind of think about it. You've kind of have it plugged in for you. But again, it's a whole process. Here to help if you want one-on-one, or you can go ahead and sign up for the webinar on December 7th, and I will talk you through it. Let me come back. Someone else, I thought I saw, so Xina, last question. Any advice on goal setting and measuring success? So he or she is talking about ROI, return on investment. It's a big thing in marketing, you guys. Actually, it's everything in marketing. It's what allows Xina and I to stay employed when we do marketing and social media campaigns. So any advice on goal setting, measuring success, i.e. ROI?
So you can look at this a couple of ways, and I'm gonna try to answer this because I know we don't have a lot of time. So if you have a product, I usually tell people, if you start to see your product move more than before, that's a great sign of success or return on your investment. So I'm going back to Black Mama Vodka's, for example, hand sanitizers, her alcohol line, all of that has been paying for me and then some. Okay. So that's one way. So you have a product. If you have like a fund, as I mentioned to you over this summer, I was working with a VC. Even though I did get them some hits, and I cannot take credit. That's why I said I can't take credit. They went from their goal was 3 million, they got 6 million. I can't take all the credit for it. However, they do attribute it to me because that's when they noticed more and more investors started jumping in when they started seeing those stories. Okay, so you know, or the number of articles you get. Sometimes you get all these stories are out there that tells you. You had 5 media hits this month. You might have had 2, but last month you had 5, and then the next month you might end up with 10. It really varies what the ROI. Some people just want to build awareness about something. That's right. That's it. They're not looking for anything else but people to get to know who they are.
In social media, sometimes it's easier because we'll say, well, I want an increase by 10% on X platform. And that's hard facts. And we can say, our efforts over the last 3 months increased engagement by. But other times, as Xina said, it's just about brand awareness. And it's hard to put a quantifiable goal setting on that, other than if you want brand awareness and you've got three articles, your blog post is up, your newsletter has got a 75% click rate, and you're on 3 social media platforms, that's a good ROI. That's a great ROI. That's a great return on investment, right?
Or you get a phone call from an investment company to invest in your firm, and that's because I saw this blog, or I saw a tweet. So I'm gonna give you one example because of social media. I'm gonna give you an example. His name is Mac Conwell. He's up in Baltimore. He's raising his own fund right now, and he's using Twitter to raise that fund. So he's been getting connected with different VCs, investors, angel investors. I mean, he's part of my Get Found, Get Funded. I have a podcast called Get Found, Get Funded. He's our 4th co-host. And that's what he's been doing during this pandemic. And we just interviewed him 2 weeks ago. We're going to drop the show hopefully this week. And he used Twitter. So it could be a tweet from the right person, or you see a number of tweets coming out, or it could be a blog post. It could be that one thing that somebody sees, and then all of a sudden, like, okay, I want to reach out to them.
And the person who asked the question saying they're asking for a service-oriented business. I think that's easy. Do you get more services? Like, do you have more customers? Is your goal brand awareness so people know about your service? And if so, how do you measure success? People are purchasing your service. Like, whatever your service is, they're signing up for it. That means it's successful. So
or they're calling
I know that sounds...
Or they're calling you to speak, asking you to speak about it.
Or they're calling you to ask you to speak. I know it sounds really cut and dry, but it is that cut and dry. It's how have you been able to move the business forward, whatever the business is. So if you're selling products, it's whether or not you're selling more products. If you're servicing the community, are you servicing more of the community as a result of your work with your PR person, with your marketing and branding person, as your social media person? Have all of these things moved the needle? Because you're going to their help because you're not asking for their help, because you yourself understand that marketing is a heavy lift. And I think that oftentimes businesses move and push marketing off to the side, and they don't put money aside for marketing, and they think that they can do it themselves. But as small business owners, it is very difficult to run our own businesses and then not have somebody else to support us on the back end.
Very true.
So we've got like 2 minutes left. I want to one more time just go back and share Xina's information and how you can get in touch with her. She and I have been friends, and we've partnered on different events, and I highly recommend her. If, again, we can't service your needs at DCSBDC.org, this is the person to turn to. We will do our best at DCSBDC, but we are no Xina Eiland. And coming up next time, December 7th, will be the last DCSBDC COVID-19 initiative webinar of the year. And we're going to be talking about social media marketing for your business, how to communicate during a crisis. This is part 2. So as we move into this second wave of the pandemic, and more businesses are potentially going to get locked down, I want to make sure that you're communicating properly on your social media channels and in your marketing and in your branding to make sure that you're changing that story and that narrative that Xina and I talk about, that storytelling, and that you're able to communicate what you're doing during this pandemic to make your customers and clients feel safe, how you're pivoting your business, and how you have thought ahead of what's going to happen if we do go into another lockdown. How can you service your customers and your clients? So that's what we're going to be talking about next time. Please go ahead and register at DCSBDC.org. Thank you, everyone who joined us. Thank you for our questions. Thank you, Xina. This has been amazing. I'm just so happy we've had this opportunity to talk. You can go ahead and email Xina. You can find me at DCSBDC if you want counseling. And we just appreciate you guys for coming. You've got like 30 seconds, Xina. Any final words before we say goodbye to everybody?
So there's an opportunity in every crisis. So, and I'm still on this from a friend of mine who I think stole it from Winston Churchill, to be honest with you. But he says it all the time. Bernard Boudreaux, he's over the Georgetown Business for Impact Institute at Georgetown University's Business School. And he says that, and he's been teaching nonprofits how to get past this pandemic. So don't let this stop you. You can shine through this. You just have to put all that noise aside and say, I have a goal, I gotta focus, and I cannot be distracted by my goal, and look for the opportunities. There are some opportunities around here that you might not be thinking about because of all the noise, and just have to shut it down. Use this week. This is Thanksgiving week. A lot of us couldn't travel home. I couldn't go to Detroit, and I'm using this week to sit down and think about my next steps to get through this wave. So I ask you to do the same.
Thank you. That's great advice. Thank you, everyone. I'll see you online, as I like to say. Appreciate you being here. Bye, Xina. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye now.